Anyone who says we don't build pyramids anymore should study the construction of the Panama Canal. It's one of the wonders of the modern world. President Trump wants it back. Is this American imperialism again? Or does he have a point? And what about Suez in 1956? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Cutting corners in world trade is, first and foremost, good business. Above all, it saves time and money on fuel and cargo maintenance. Take the Panama Canal. A voyage from New York City to Jakarta's Tanjung Priok port via the canal would take 20 days and 6 hours, with a distance of over 18,000 kilometers. Without it, the journey would require navigating around Cape Horn, one of the most dangerous sea routes in the world, and would take 28 days and 4 hours to cover around 25,000 kilometers. Donald Trump, a business mogul turned US president, wants the Panama Canal. Time is money, so he wants it fast.
Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it.
Being one of the most remarkable engineering feats in its history, the construction of the Panama Canal was the ambition of many, including France's Ferdinand de Lesseps, the French diplomat-engineer who built the Suez Canal. However, landslides, floods, corruption and tropical diseases, which killed over 20,000 workers, finally undid Lesseps' vision in 1889. But after US-backed Panama gained independence from Colombia in 1903, Washington secured the rights to build and control the canal zone. The Hay-Banal-Varilla Treaty granted the US a 10-mile-wide strip across Panama. Led by US Army engineer John Frank Stevens and later George Washington Goethals, the US redesigned the project as a lock-based canal. To keep malaria and yellow fever in check, Dr. William Gorgas implemented effective measures, drastically reducing worker mortality rates. The canal was completed on August 15, 1914, just as World War I began. The first official transit was by the SS Ancon. Over the entire period of its construction, it's estimated that 25,000 to 30,000 workers perished in accidents due to disease and harsh working conditions. By force of the Torrijos-Carter treaties signed by the US and Panama in Washington, D.C. on September 7, 1977, Panama gained control of the canal at noon on December 31, 1999. Ending the control of the canal that the US had exercised since 1903.
My guest today is Bartłomiej, the Programme Director of the Warsaw Security Forum. Welcome once more to our programme.
Lovely to be here.
Panama today, a bit of history. Anyone sitting on a hilltop in the 15th, 16th century would see the Atlantic on the one side and the Pacific on the other. The connection, to connect the two is an obvious centuries-old project.
Yeah, and it's actually a very profitable in a sense. When you look at the maritime routes, this is very obvious that you look for the shortcuts.
Yes.
People were the same actually with the Suez Canal. I mean, of course, the project appeared only in the 19th century, but the thinking about the necessity of having this kind of a shortcut, if I'm not mistaken, dates back to at least Roman times in case of Suez Canal, and
yes,
when it comes to the
Charles V
to
Spain,
to Panama Canal, that's at least 16th century idea, but it only actually appeared in reality at the end of 19th century. Certainly because of the construction capabilities that countries involved acquired. Firstly, there was actually French idea. Then, of course, Americans they also expanded this idea and took over. But it was not only a matter of the construction, not only a matter of actually the engineering process, but certainly also a change in the strategic aspect, strategic perspectives. When the U.S. became a country comparable to its current borders, with an outreach to both the eastern coast and the western coast, of course, the necessity to combine both potentials, like the navy on the west coast and navy on the east coast, the shortcut in trade that was necessary for the U.S. And there comes actually Theodore Roosevelt and the ideas of strategist Mahan, etc., that impacted his way of thinking. So the U.S. has become the global power at the end of the 19th century, and it, simply speaking, needed the Panama Canal as it was actually constructed during that time.
So it maintained the possession of the Panama Canal zone throughout the two world wars, or the Second World War in particular, and it gave it away to Panama. Why was that? What was the main reason? Was it just a temporary a fit of woolly-headed thinking on human rights and giving back power to the people, that kind of zeitgeist?
Well, certainly it was embedded in President Carter's way of thinking. That was right after the time where you had actually a lot of anti-American sentiment in Central and Southern America, where you have also of course the communist impact on this these countries. So the U.S. had a necessity to actually reach out also to the regimes, not only democratic actually ones in these parts of America, and try to build bridges, not only to have the imperial approach to these countries, but also try to build bridges. Well, Carter had his own way of thinking about dealing with the world, and with Panama Canal, that was rather actually a willingness to more actually to strengthen this, let's say, normative aspect, like the outreach, whereas actually the U.S. can be building this relationship rather on the peaceful manner than on the imperialist manner. But it didn't last actually long, because even in the 80s, the U.S. Was more and more involved in South and actually Central America, even by military operations.
Yes, it invaded the country. Yes.
Yeah.
Is this seen now as a strategic error on the part of the Carter administration?
Certainly, if you ask people who were supportive of this idea back then on the Carter side, if they're alive right now, they would still be happy with the results. From the Republican side, from the people who are connected right now with the Trump administration, they treat it as the very obvious error, and it wasn't, if I'm not mistaken, well received even in the 70s. There was a lot of negative arguments also fluctuating back then. So it wasn't like everyone was super happy with the fact that Panama was actually acquiring the control over the canal.
The way that President Trump seems to be shaping his foreign policy is in this McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, very, not brutal, but very assertive way of looking at America as a great power, as a great imperial power. You mentioned Alfred Mahan, the great naval strategist. He sees America once more perhaps as a global naval power, and you can see the strategic necessity of America controlling the Panama Canal. As we spoke earlier, Greenland too. All apologies to Denmark and to the Panamanian Republic, but looking at it on a map in terms of American interest, it does make some sort of sense.
Well, you have to take into account one thing that I assume actually from the European side is not that well understood. When you look at the issue of both the Panama Canal and also Greenland, the US treats that not as a matter of foreign policy, but as a matter of their own national security. It's very like inner-oriented thinking. So in order to have like a security on your own borders, you do not only try to limit yourself within your own borders, but you also act outside of it, project power in order to prevent something to happen. If you are willing, if you are a global power, of course the horizon of your thinking is completely different than it is of a country that doesn't have these aspirations or this potential. If you want to be a global power, if you want to sustain that position, it is obvious to anyone who thinks about it that you have to also be a global power in terms of the naval capabilities, in terms of protection of the trade routes. Therefore, actually, having control over Panama Canal is almost like a no-brainer for anyone who would be sitting in the White House and trying, of course, to think what kind of a security does it bring, or it limits the security of the U.S.
There's a parallel here with the Russian strategists who want to get these entry points and exit points around their land borders, especially Poland, Finland.
Actually, it's quite interesting because from the Russian point of view, the aspect of actually possessing the harbors that are not freezing during the winter time has always been like one of the most important factors in the strategic thinking since at least Peter the Great.
Yes.
They have a very limited number of these, and in each and every single war, it was the question for Russian strategy. But coming back to the U.S., the arguments that Trump administration raises related to both the Panama Canal and Greenland are a matter of the national security, not a matter of actually the foreign policy thinking. Of course, this foreign policy has an impact on that because you have to, have the external outreach, but the reasoning comes from the internal politics. It is also, it's even it's older than only Mahan thinking. It's way embedded into the Monroe Doctrine from the beginning of 19th century. But the issue here is that it is very visible that China is present not only on African continent, it's not only present on Asian continent, but is also very much present around the shores of Americas. The Chinese are investing a lot of money and a lot of the political capital into some of the southern American states. They are present in the canal, in the Panama Canal.
In what way? In investing in the infrastructure, or
mainly in infrastructure, but it's not limited, of course. And every single of this infrastructural project they also have like strings attached.
Yes.
We've seen that also in Europe. Take the example of port in Piraeus in Greece, which was also a huge subject to us Europeans. But it also happens in Panama. And then you have, of course, the presence and the growing presence of Chinese that far as actually the northwest passage. Because of the changes in climate, you have this trade routes will be opening also for trade and for vessels. And this is actually the shortest route to some of the Asian countries. And in all of that, actually, the US has to have also the response that is, as I said, it is not based in the foreign policy only, but it's also based on the very national interest of the US. And the same actually goes when it comes to the current policies on deportation and migrant flows, etc. The
other great canal, the Suez Canal, one thing that came into my mind immediately was the British and French example in 1956. The Suez Canal was nationalised. They mounted an expedition to retake it, and the Americans pulled the rug from under British and French machinations, you can say, that caused this run on the pound and all that sort of stuff. How does President Trump avoid that? They've gone into the Panama once before, of course, as you mentioned. Are they keen to avoid that again, or are there other methods of regaining the popularity. Give everybody $1 million, and they'll vote for you. Like in Greenland.
Certainly for Trump, trade things are more common than projecting power in terms of warfare. But let me just remind you that actually in this inaugural speech, he also said that he's not keen on actually having new wars opened. It's rather actually limiting the activity of the U.S. around the world in that terms. I mean, Suez Canal is a good example for good and for bad. For good because it shows that if you are messing around with the international trade routes, you can have actually the response that is bigger than only limited to the dealings of two countries involved in warfare over some territory, because a lot of people would profit and a lot of people will lose on this kind of arrangements. But it's also an example of actually the end of French and British imperial capabilities in the world.
Yes.
And they ended because the U.S. didn't come in support of the ideas coming from the UK and from France. Both these countries wanted to have the control of the Suez Canal because they thought that this is actually the key for them to sustain this imperial outreach around the world. And in that way, actually, the American thinking is also very similar to that. I mean, having control of the Panama Canal is the aspect of actually being capable of having the policies that are international.
Transferring on naval forces.
The difference is, though, that the U.S. is still in a position that it is capable of actually using its own power and gaining from that. Whereas actually the Brits and the French after the Second World War, and especially in 1956, under Eden, if I'm not mistaken, were not in that position anymore.
Yes.
So it's like, it is still the time for the US to have this kind of an activity. For the Brits and for French, it was like past glory. The thing is, though, that with the activity of Donald Trump in the Panama Canal, I don't believe that his main thinking is limited to using the military force. That would be some kind of an ultimate activity.
It's an amazing human structure, bit of construction, that Panama Canal, and very geopolitically sensitive. So we'll be watching that, no doubt, plus Greenland as well. Bartłomiej, thank you very much once more for coming on to our programme.
Thank you for having me.
That's all we have time for today. Do join us again Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays at 2:15 p.m. CET. See you then.